Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/BeanCast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 496, Old Man Stories. For Monday, May 21st, 2018, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. It seems that the hottest thing happening in social media these days is the fascination with stories. These quick snapshots of a person's life are generating tens of millions of uses every day. Now advertisers are taking notice. How do we get involved? We'll discuss. Also, how failing trust is changing the business. AdTech's new pitch to publishers. Whether Nielsen has finally outlived its usefulness. Plus this week's AdFail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder of the Difference Engine, research and strategy consultant, Ms. Farrah Bostic. Hi, Farrah.
Hi, Bob. I will try not to sneeze on you.
That's okay. I'm coming down with the usual allergy malaise right now myself, so just have to get through it.
Brutal.
Now, also with us, we have longtime television network marketing consultant for clients that include NBC and AMC. Mr. Bill Hartnett is here. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Bob. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us. And
Glad to be here.
Next up, we have a senior digital art director at Wonderman, Ms. Jerlyn Thomas. Jerlyn, I am so excited to finally get you on the program.
I am so happy to be here, and thanks for making me join a seat at the table.
Absolutely. And finally, we welcome back Vice President of Marketing at Event Hero and co-host of that other podcast you love, Marketing Over Coffee, Mr. John J. Wall. Hi, John.
Hey, Bob. My appearance today is sponsored by Flonase Allergy Relief myself.
Oh, my God. Flonase. Flonase is the best thing ever. I use the generic Kirkland brand from Costco. It's like half the price and twice the benefit. So.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Well, I want to jump right into the topics. Almost every one of the major social platforms now features some sort of stories function. You know, that thing where you put photos and videos together. I'm talking like an old person to a whole bunch of other old people here. And this disposable, creative, dynamic form of content is finally catching the attention of advertisers because of the sheer number of users. I mean, I'm seeing numbers quoted as high as 50 million users on Facebook actually taking advantage of this platform that they've put in place. But Jerlyn, can advertisers find a way to gain acceptance within these platforms, or are ad interruptions a foregone conclusion, which is necessarily going to just make the entire experience bad for users? So what's your take on advertisers participating in meaningful ways in the stories area?
Well, as a token millennial on this panel,
oh, rub it in.
You basically sent me in a rabbit hole yesterday of looking for stories because I'm not a consumer of these stories. I follow a lot of people. So, yeah, if you're following a lot of people and they all have 50 stories, that's not a good use of your time at all. However, I think that brands can utilize this very well if they do it correctly. And that's by working with the influencers. Myself, I'm probably more curious about what my friends are wearing or what they're working on or what they're doing at the moment that they're not sharing within their feed. But again, I'm not really consuming a lot of their stories.
So what you're suggesting is that from a standpoint of how to involve yourself, that creating ads for these platforms doesn't make sense? Or are you saying that ads associated with influencers are just as effective as influencers actually making recommendations of the product via the stories? And I ask this not totally. I don't want to be disingenuous with this question. I mean, I understand the importance of stories. I know how much they're being adopted by every single social platform. I realize that there are tens of millions of people generating stories on a regular basis. I just cannot understand why anybody would want to waste their time using this. And I know that shows my age, but at the same time, it's completely mystifying to me how users are going to react to advertisers getting involved in this space in any kind of meaningful way that's going to generate some kind of awareness.
I guess I'm going to share a lot of my secrets when I do create these story content. For example, yesterday I posted a story and a third of the people who saw it, they skipped it. And you have the analytics on that. You have all the insights. It tells you if 150 people saw your story, 10 people skipped it and went to the next story. But there's also insight that tells you when they went back. So I think if a brand utilizes influencers, a good practice would be to ask them to get the screenshots of their insights and see what's working, or else.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating fact that I hadn't really considered. And I want to bring Farrah in on the conversation here. I'm not sure what kind of research you've done on this area or what kind of interactions you've had on stories, but is this a regular occurrence that people are skipping through stories, and does that negate the usefulness of stories to advertisers because people just aren't paying attention to the stories in the first place? They're just kind of browsing through, skipping past, and not actually consuming the content.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, this feels like a problem a lot of advertising's had for a long time. There is a lot of skipping going on in stories. I think where it makes a difference is when, I think to Jerlyn's point, when there are influencers that I chose to follow versus interruptions from brands that maybe I followed, maybe I didn't. They're just sort of turning up in my stories. Those things are or feel different to people. They're more likely to actually watch a story play out from somebody that they opted in to follow than not. I think the other side of it is just one of we're skipping a lot of stuff. I mean, the level of sophistication, even on the part of ordinary users in using stories, even fairly sophisticated users, that's still developing. So brands coming in and figuring out how to use it as well is also going to take a little bit of time. A good story where it feels like a story. Here's a bunch of images and video and my little markups and drawings and stickers and things about an event I went to or a birthday party or a great evening out. Those kinds of things get my full attention.
Correct.
Whereas the ones that just feel like I'm dumping some stuff into stories because I don't want to post it permanently are a little bit less important to do. But I think, people are pretty savvy about what's skippable and what's not. And right now, stories are hugely skippable. I don't even really have to scroll through them. I can swipe and keep going.
Agreed. Another point, yesterday when I went through this rabbit hole of watching stories, there's influencers, and to Farrah's point, I follow her intentionally. And she was at a party. She posted what was going on at the event, and she had a photo of her and a handbag. And she invited the people to swipe up. And when you swiped up, you went to the website where you could purchase that handbag. And I actually almost purchased her handbag yesterday. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome. I'm always glad to encourage people to use direct marketing whenever possible. So go ahead.
But I think what might be helpful is, along with the stories, there's also an invitation to look at this person's feed, because I also see insights on my regular posts. So yesterday I posted about my triathlon training, and I saw thousands of users saw it. There was lots of impressions. However, very few people liked it. And that's very difficult. Of course, it makes me feel bad as only a few people liked it, but
yeah, but we've talked about this a number of times on the show. I mean, likes are so meaningless when it comes down to the actual effectiveness of whether the content is reaching people. I mean, just because you don't like it doesn't mean that you're not influenced by it, that you haven't seen it, that you haven't consumed it, and that you're not in some way affected by that content. And
you know what was interesting about that post, however, you could also see how many people went to my profile because of it. So there are actually more engagement of people going to my profile to see what else I had posted.
John, what's your take on all of this? I mean, it's like, are you employing stories on a regular basis in your capacity as a marketing director or vice president of marketing? I mean, are you actively using the platform? Are you getting any results from it?
No, I've kind of taken a pass on it. My whole take on this has just been that it's, for celebrities, it's perfect. It's a chance to do small, short content that gives you insight to what they're doing. So I think it's great for advertisers that want to jump in with those influencers. But as far as smaller brands and the general public, I mean, it's no different than just YouTube videos. And in fact, I'd prefer YouTube because I just like more of the Google juice and easier to pass, easier to embed. So yeah, I think the general public's getting wrapped up in it, and I think they're having fun making basically crummy little videos. But yeah, I think it's for the celebs and the folks that are getting 1 million+ views. Those are the ones who are going to crush this.
Well, you're implying something that has always been in the back of my head when it comes to stories, is that it's perfect for any kind of major consumer brand to associate with somebody of that's creating content that people want to consume. It's just like, Bill, it's just like television. It's if you have content that people want to watch, that people are actually consuming, that people are engaged with, advertisers want to be involved with it. And it's usually the consumer advertisers. It's not the B2B or mid-tier brands like, say, what John's offering with Event Hero. I mean, it tends to be the Cokes and Pepsis and McDonald's of the world who want to get involved with this.
Mhm.
Bill, are you there?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was thinking about, and I read somewhere this weekend, I read that 150 million people a day use Facebook stories. And again, I think like most of us, as soon as I see that someone has added to their story, you can guarantee that I have added to things that I'm going to ignore. Which is because, well, it's a lot of it just, to
well,
me,
you and I are both old. And I mean, it's just like, and I say that in the best possible way. I say that
I just don't want to dedicate to.
Yeah.
But it's funny, this week my daughter, she always uses Snapchat stories, and they're really funny and engaging. And I can see if your kids and if you're a kid or not a kid, if you're a younger person, and I think these are really fun when they're your friends and they're your really close, great group of friends. But I think for a brand, it's really hard to break into that great, close group of friends that you care about everything they do. So unless it's really funny, it has to be great, and you have to get people to watch just in the first place at all. So how you get to there is super tricky. And once they're there, it better be good or you will be ignored forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Bill, I want to follow up a little bit about stories in terms of the kind of content that you create. You're always trying to promote television. You're trying to promote mass appeal programming. Do you find that stories offer you the opportunity to extend the content and make it more interesting and potentially bring more viewers into the mix?
Well, I will tell you where I work, they just this week hired one person on staff to create social content, which will include stories. It will include, short videos. It'll include stories on all platforms. And there's another one that's coming imminently. So clearly, my current major client, or where I go every single day, is AMC, and we're really investing heavily in social content to help promote programming. So to me, I think the fact that they're willing to put, they're putting two heads, directly on that right now says something that, yeah, we really, really want people to engage across all platforms and in any way we can get them, and also, go to where our normal advertising doesn't go. Most of what we do is obviously our on air, which is our biggest piece of real estate, plus any off air that we pay for, and a fair amount of, we do stuff for Snapchat stories, we do stuff for Instagram, we do a lot of our video that we're creating, we're resizing for social platforms. But now we're repurposing it. But right now we have just brought in two people to specifically create stuff for for Snapchat, for Instagram, for Facebook. Mm-hmm. So to me, clearly somebody sees some real value there.
And that makes a lot of sense for, like I was saying, when you're creating content already, when your whole business is creating entertainment for people, it's a natural extension to go into this space and create additional content that engages the audience further. Mm-hmm. But go ahead, Bill. You were going to say something?
Creating The Walking Dead or a show that people really want.
Bill dropped off here. So, Farrah, what's your thoughts on what's your thoughts on using this type of platform for other types of brands? Because I think there's a natural connection, like what Bill was saying about this entertainment area where you can create additional content to help to expand the universe of viewership for your particular entertainment programming that you're creating. But what about like brands? Do brands belong in this space? Do brands is it worth the time, effort, and money to create branded stories, or should they be looking more toward partnerships with influencers and people who are getting audience and be the advertisers like they've always been?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a move towards using more influencers in social media marketing in general, just because it feels more authentic and it's more of what we as users have opted into. We've opted in to follow the influencer. We haven't opted in to follow the brand. A lot of the time. The other side of it, though, that's interesting, and here I will give a plug to a yoga studio in Cobble Hill near where I live in Brooklyn called Mala Yoga, and they use Instagram stories incredibly well. But in a way, what they get as a benefit is that the two kind of founders of the business are also influencers in their community, so they use stories to explain the focus of the week in what they're doing in their practice, or explain how to get into a down dog, whatever they're doing, they are sort of augmenting the community of practice that they've already built in real life in a story-driven way. And it works really well for them to create these kinds of tutorial videos that give you a sense of what it's like to practice with them or what their perspective on their practice is. That I always use them in I might be at Madison Square Garden or NBC, and I always use Mala Yoga as an example of how to use Instagram really well, because I think that they manage to straddle those two worlds really well. They are both influencers and also a brand trying to drive engagement with their business. A lot of brands want to, and we have seen this in every new form of media, just sort of dump advertising or promotions into the latest channel. So unless you're going to be thoughtful, unless you've got an influencer strategy, unless you've got a real content strategy to go with whatever you're putting in stories, you're just dumping messaging in another channel. So, the answer, does it apply to other brands? I think it depends. What do you want to show us? What story do you want to tell? What information do you want to provide? What experience do you want to augment? It's harder to imagine a stories strategy for washing up liquid, but I wouldn't put it past a great creative team to come up with something compelling. It's just that, like everything else, you can't just be in the channel. You have to be in the channel with something meaningful.
And to that point, I mean, for me, the biggest concern about brands getting involved in this is that you have to churn out a lot of content and a lot of engagement. And I think brands are good at coming up with that one idea that gets traction, and then they churn out a lot of crap in between those great engagements. And I'm wondering, is there any advantage to a brand continually generating lots of crap, waiting for that great moment to come out where they get a piece of content that is incredibly exciting, incredibly engaging, and gets talked about? And, for me, it's almost like get into the space when you have something meaningful to say, but don't be in there constantly, because this is not for you. This is for consumers to talk to each other and to share their lives and their stories. It feels kind of icky. I mean, Jerlyn, am I speaking your language here, or am I?
Absolutely, because clear example, yesterday when you made me go through this rabbit hole,
I made you do nothing.
I found one of my friends that I follow. She almost all her posts are now ads, and it's quite annoying because when I first followed her, it's because of her running, and I was super inspired by her. And it's great that she's being paid by these brands, but now I'm just wondering, are you just selling your soul? Because this is not why I followed you. And I basically trusted your authentic voice to tell me what I need to be doing because I'm inspired by you.
Well, food for thought, but we got to move on to the next topic. Trust is a big issue in advertising these days, just to state the obvious, people. But the impact of failing trust is dramatically affecting what works and what doesn't in the ad world. Basic truths like reach and frequency are finding themselves pitted against the reality of where the ad is found and the trustworthiness of the content surrounding the ads, making it a lot more difficult to get the kind of awareness we used to get. So, Bill, how does this potential bottleneck of where ads can be most effective impact our ability to create awareness and drive results in our advertising programs? What's your take on this?
Well, I don't know that anybody's ever trust advertising that much, but I do feel like, trust continues to drop. But it is funny how I do feel there is such a great link in, and I see it all the time on Facebook, where I will have a conversation with somebody on Facebook about, say, running shoes. And then all of a sudden, I'm instantly being served ads about that brand of running shoes. I mean, it's obviously, it happens all the time, or behavioral targeting if I search things. But I do feel that in social, when you get the right people sort of connect, it's sort of that right connection between conversation, stuff that you've seen, and then the right ad, then it works. I feel when it comes at you at the wrong time and in the wrong place, I feel like it's just wasting money. And more, I feel, it's why, going right back to what we were talking about with all these social stories, is people want to find a way to connect with you in a more meaningful, personalized and empathetic way, or advertisers do. And if they can't, and that's when you're not connecting in that sort of really smart way that appeals to, hey, here's what I need right now, or here's what I'm thinking about right now, then it's almost, then I either ignore it, don't trust it, or don't care about it. But then all at the same time, when it's far too personalized and far too empathetic, sometimes it's really creepy, and then my trust drops there. So I feel like there's just this crazy fine balance between being too intrusive but then also, finding that level of trust. But I do think once you trust a company, unless they do something that really fails you, I mean, I will use, I know we were talking a little bit about running right before this. There are certain running shoe companies that can do no wrong for me, and I will always buy their shoes, and I will always be loyal. But when if you're a New York Roadrunners member, you are constantly barraged with emails from one of their primary sponsors, who I won't name. Mm-hmm. And I will never buy their shoes because of that, because I have received I probably get 50 emails a week about their shoes.
Yes, something you said early on in this, as you were starting to talk, you talked about the fact that advertisers want to get more meaningful reactions and engagements with their audience. I would actually challenge that, and I want to go back to that comment, because I think that's what advertisers say they want, but what they really want is programmatic solutions that don't get them into trouble. And I know that's not a best practices type answer, but that's just the reality. Advertisers want cheaper, easier, faster ways to get reach and frequency. They want to get those ads out very, very quickly. And programmatic gives them that solution, but it puts them in places where they don't want to be. It puts them in associated with content that they don't want, the kind of experiences that they don't want. And so it's placing an increased premium on the types of content that is legitimately trustworthy to place your ads in those types of environments. And I think it's going to create a bottleneck, isn't it? I mean, if there's so few players out there that we can actually trust, like your New York Times or your Wall Street Journal of the world, it's going to drive up those prices, which is going to be great for publishers, but it's going to be lousy for getting the reach and frequency that we expect. Or is it? I mean, that's where I want to get some thoughts on. I mean, John, what's your take on that particular assessment of the state of the industry? Are advertisers really after more meaningful engagements, or are they after trying to get some way to be fail-safe in delivering their programmatic solutions?
Yeah, you're totally right. And I mean, this will come up later too, but it's like this Google thing. It's like they want to have an automated solution that's personable, relevant, right on time. And unfortunately, the tech is just not there. I don't know if the tech will ever be there too. That's another problem we have. So yeah, it goes right to the trust problem. It's kind of like every time you go on social media, that's a chance for glory right there. A running shoe company could come back and just kind of fire you a discount code, kind of medium case, right? It could be a lot worse. Or somebody could get on and say, oh yeah, your long distance trail running, here's a specific model that you might want to check out. And that's what separates the champs from the chumps.
But ultimately, isn't the goal of programmatic, the long-term goal is to have a computer think like a person and have a computer create personal relationships with everyone that they're trying to sell something to. And along that way, there are going to be so many massive failures, but ultimately, it is to create a one-on-one relationship as close as possible as a machine can get to a person and seem like a person.
Yeah. Well, and that's at the heart of this. The problem with this is with all this AI stuff, it's all in the training. You'd need to take a couple years to train that AI so that it really is giving relevant on-the-spot answers. And unfortunately, with the average tenure of a marketing employee being like 8 months, it's never going to happen.
Farrah, I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm listening to this conversation, and I'm just thinking that the ultimate end game here is that certain publishers are going to be more reliable than other publishers, and that's going to drive the prices up, and it's going to make it so that reach and frequency for mid-tier to small brands becomes harder and harder to achieve outside of doing programmatic buys across a spectrum of crap, because you've got all these potential advertising space out there, but it's not necessarily legitimate, nor is it giving you the kind of trustworthiness that consumers are starting to demand.
Well, and I think that actually gets to the interesting thing. I think, big brands continue to have the luxury, by having large media budgets, to do a mix of things. They continue to be able to make, human-based decisions about where they want their brands to be placed. And then they get to also experiment around the edges with programmatic. Programmatic's big selling point really was for these, as you say, smaller and mid-sized brands who thought that this would be a cheaper, more effective, more efficient way of assembling their reach and frequency desires. And I think what's happened is, like everything else, it's that first chart in the deck from the last 10 years for every agency and research company, living in a fragmented media universe, the middling options, the local weeklies and the classified ads and the circulars inserted in something else, those options are now masquerading as news organizations when they're not. They're masquerading as social media influencers when they're bots. They're masquerading as, reputable publishing platforms when they are anything but. And I think one of the problems of programmatic has been, for big brands and small, the ability to trust the platform itself, the actual ad tech platform that is serving them into these placements. And when you've got brands who don't understand how it is that they wound up on Breitbart or anywhere else in the universe that they didn't intend to be on, some of this has to do with, frankly, lack of sophistication about how cookies work, which that will also become more complicated now that we're living in a GDPR universe. But nevertheless, there's a need to get pretty sophisticated. And I think that the real promise of programmatic was a level of control and customization that actually isn't in it. And I think, yes, theoretically we should be training these platforms to think more like people, but the ad tech platforms that do the programmatic, they don't want that either. They need to be able to deliver the reach and frequency they said they were going to deliver. And the easiest, cheapest way for them to do that is to kind of spray and pray. Wherever they can get it on is where they want to do it. And you have publishers who want to curtail the amount of programmatic advertising, even the amount of real estate they give to that, because the ads are low quality. And then you've got advertisers who don't want to be on the low quality websites. In a way, it's almost some kind of perverse mirror image of the race to the bottom. It's like everyone's trying to keep from letting their feet touch the bottom, and just like quick, no, keep moving so you don't actually touch the bottom of the barrel. But this has always been kind of the problem of programmatic is that there was going to always be a lot of junk in that system. Now some of that junk is actually like dangerous to democracy.
So let me take this tack then. Is this ultimately this move by consumers to demand more trustworthy content? Is this ultimately good for the advertising business? Is it ultimately good for the publishing business? Because money talks here, and if the desire of consumers is to have less of the crap in terms of the type of content, and they're going to start penalizing brands that they see that advertise on that type of content, does that actually generate more valuable content in the end? Or, I want to get your opinion on this, Jerlyn. I mean, it's just like, is this better for the industry in the end to have something like this happening, even though in the short term it's going to drive prices up and it's going to create some kind of bottleneck, as I keep saying, of advertising?
Yeah, would like to think that advertisers are paying to us consumers because we're the ones with the money. But I actually think they really need to focus on what consumers are saying. If we're ignoring your ads, there's a reason.
And it could be all kinds of reasons. It could be trustworthiness of the product, but it could be also the content in which I'm being displayed next to.
Exactly, because our passions are like our issues that we care about. You have to focus on that, like the things that matter to us in the end.
Well, continuing this conversation into the next topic, publishers are exploring online subscriptions more aggressively because of the facts that we just talked about. I mean, advertising is getting to be so completely crazy. It's causing all kinds of backlash. Consumers don't necessarily like it. They're ad blocking like crazy. And the result is that publishers need to find some kind of new subscription revenue. And so they're pursuing online subscriptions as aggressively as they possibly can. And to meet step with that, many of the ad tech companies are changing their pitches as well, claiming that they now can bolster subscription revenue as well as ad revenue. But Farrah, considering publishers are also looking to downsize their ad operations, is there really any kind of market here, or is this just ad tech desperation? Thoughts?
Ad tech desperation is my default answer.
Oh,
to
come on!
Most questions I mean, I think I'm only half joking. I think the interesting thing is that publishers are currently writing a period in which people are experimenting in their own lives with the idea that maybe if I paid a subscription fee, I wouldn't be inundated in all of this crappy advertising. I wouldn't be constantly interrupted by stuff that isn't relevant to my passions, as Jerlyn says, that isn't an influencer I chose to follow, that isn't content I am endemically interested in. And so, and I have been the advocate for, I will pay the ransom to not see your crappy ads.
Oh, yeah.
Please Instagram, let me pay you. Please Facebook, let me pay you. Give me the option to do something else. And, I hear the argument on having this sort of two-tiered system of rich users not having to see advertising and poor users having to see advertising. And I would just sort of say, ABC, please meet HBO. Like that has kind of been the content universe for a really long time. And I think that the interesting thing with more options, more over-the-top options for broadcast content, more digital subscription sales happening for traditional print publishers, people wanting to go into that for a variety of reasons. One is ready access to content that would otherwise be behind some level of firewall, or a desire to support journalism, or to support the content that they like the best, paying for access to things they would otherwise have to have a $200 a month cable bundle in order to get. All of these things are driving people towards subscription-based models on the consumer end. From the publisher's perspective, it's way more valuable to have subscribers than it is to have ads. Subscribers are recurring revenue over a period of time. It drives up lifetime value of customer acquisition. Advertising doesn't do that. So, from an
let me interrupt you for
hugely valuable.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because some of this research that we've been getting on the show recently seems to suggest that over-the-top solutions, and I think there's an analogy there to any kind of subscription service, that over-the-top solutions are not as lucrative as a lot of these companies were hoping for, because the subscriber has the ability to jump in and out of that subscription at any time. And that creates a lot of churn in the marketplace. So, is a subscription, an online subscription, as valuable to a magazine or an online magazine or an online content publisher as, say, an offline one was? Because they're not able to maintain any kind of relationship past a month or two when the person has gotten the content that they're looking for and is just jumping out again.
Well, I mean, I think there are different trade-offs in the cost of customer acquisition. So, the cost to acquire advertising dollars on your site requires having an internal sales team. It requires dealing with the the vicissitudes of advertisers. What are they interested in this month, and what aren't they interested in? Are they willing to pay my rate card? Aren't they? There's just as much variability on that side as there is on the other side. And ad dollars and ad spend go up and down cyclically related to the economy and a variety of other factors. From an investor's perspective, the subscriber base, growing a subscriber base substantially, looks hugely valuable. And the reason for that is it redounds to the benefit of the ad sales team. Like, it's not just that that's a steady source of revenue for the publisher in theory. It's also that by saying we have a guaranteed base of people, even with a certain rate of churn, that will always be exposed to your advertising, then that's way more valuable from the investor's perspective. I want to be clear on that, than just having an ad-supported model. I think what's interesting about over the top and about digital subscriptions is that there are so many variations on the theme. There's subscription only in the sense of Netflix or HBO. There is subscription with ad support like Spotify has. And frankly, like most publishers have traditionally had, advertising in the beginning was a support revenue stream, not the majority revenue stream. Now, obviously, things shifted, and it's looking like maybe they're shifting the other direction due to unbundling and consumer choice and broadband and the moment we're all living in. But I think there's something interesting about anything that might help publishers get more subscribers, more consistently engaged users who have higher lifetime values than the people who pop in and read their 5 articles a month and then pop out again until it resets. They are more valuable as customers than the people who are getting what they can for free. For ad tech, however, I don't really know how they meaningfully support that business model. And so that they're claiming that they might, kudos to them for giving it a shot, but I don't know how they really support that business model. If they can come up with something, I'm sure publishers would be hugely grateful. But right now, it sounds to me like, to your question, an act of desperation.
Yeah, Bill.
But also, see,
yeah, I was going to go to you.
Doesn't it just add to the confusion? I mean, ad tech is such a confusing. The ad tech pitches are so confusing anyway, yes. And then you throw that in. And I honestly, I think it goes right back to what Farrah said. It really is just an act of desperation. It's like, no, help us this is what's going to make us stand out from the other 30 people that you talked to that talked about the same confusing algorithms, the same confusing, insights and data that we can't really express in a succinct way, but hey, we'll sell you more subscriptions. And that's always the weird thing about ad tech is it's very hard to understand anyway. And then you throw this on top. Honestly, it just seems like, well, but we'll make you money.
But subscription marketing, when you're going after subscribers, is one of the most data-rich opportunities for an ad tech company to survive and to thrive in that kind of environment. I mean, it's so based on being personalized because it's so based on the individual's connection to the content. It's not like advertising, which is a general awareness or trying to troll for clicks and conversions. Trying its best to maybe remarket to somebody based on some previous behavior. I would assume that when you're dealing with a content subscriber, you have some very rich data behind it. You have this incredible opportunity to connect with that subscriber or that potential subscriber in some meaningful ways based on the content that they viewed and the kind of engagements they've had with your online publication. I would imagine that ad tech could have phenomenal effect on not only acquiring new customers or new subscribers, but to keep the subscribers interested in an ongoing basis. I mean, John, am I completely drinking the Kool-Aid here? I mean, I know I'm playing devil's advocate, but any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. It's just that's such a huge change of the gears for so many businesses, and it's just nobody knows the profitability of either side in the long term, really. So it's just Wild West right now.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, Bill, on that? I mean, it's just like, is there an opportunity that maybe we're not paying attention to that ad tech could actually excel at?
Well, I think you stated it. Honestly, you sold me on ad tech selling subscriptions just now. Because I always think of it, I mean, honestly, the way you put it made me feel like, hey, maybe I should give it a second thought. But honestly, I mean, just from what I know, it honestly, I don't know. I don't see it. I don't really see it as something that a company can all of a sudden, hey, we do this, but now we do this as well. But that's just me.
Well, that's just all of us. We all have a certain amount of skepticism when it comes to ad tech companies. There's so many of them. There's so many of them. Well, I want to go to our final topic of the evening. Finally, Nielsen has been mocked and maligned for decades, but in the end, it's been the only true standard that television ad sellers and buyers could agree upon. So we all used it and we all just made our peace with it. But John, is this finally changing? And has Nielsen finally outlived its value to the industry it has served? Any thoughts on that?
That's such a tough question, because I would have thought, if you'd asked me like 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh my God, Nielsen would have vanished within 3 years and it wouldn't be here anymore. But, there still just kind of needs to be a standard that everybody agrees on. And I think that's what's been proven is the accuracy is not as important as just the fact that it's entrenched and it's, agreed upon by everybody. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't see any reason why they can't continue unless there's some kind of major, subscription obviously is a huge sea change for that. If we see subscription continue to gain ground, then the numbers will be solid and there's no concern. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's, maybe it's like AM radio. I mean, it will never go away.
Bill, I want to get you in on this because I know you have a lot of opinions around Nielsen particularly, but what's driving the dissatisfaction in the television industry around Nielsen? I mean, we've covered a lot of this on the show before, but I just want to have a concise roundup from you on why people distrust Nielsen so heavily right now.
Well, honestly, I think that's gone way back. I don't think anybody's ever liked Nielsen. I don't even know that Nielsen likes Nielsen because they're always trying, every year they come out with a new way that they're going to look at, they're going to look at sort of like total audience. But I think that the reason, it made headlines this week was because of the Turner upfront. And if you think about it, it goes right back to what we were just talking about with ad tech. It's a sales pitch, and the upfront is their biggest opportunity to do their sales pitch for the year. And if they can offer something extra, because they're talking about their audience insights, and for Turner, it's it's all about social, it's all about sort of what they feel is audience engagement, the live events they're doing, that it's much more than a TV rating. And I think with Nielsen, the hard part with Nielsen, I think if you're an NBC, if you're a CBS and you have massive, massive numbers of people watching TV, you can get a roughly accurate assessment of who's watching. But I think as you get into smaller, and even now with the big networks, as audiences get smaller for individual shows, as you sort of sliver up the audience into smaller and smaller pieces, it's really hard to get quality data if you're a very small cable network with very small audiences, because the sampling is so small that when it comes back to if you're showing an audience of a couple of 100,000 people and you try to break that down demographically to sell to advertisers, I think it starts to fail a little bit. So I do feel that every network is going to offer their additional insights, and I think for Turner this is really, it's all about not only, hey, we're going to use Nielsen, but we're going to give you this, and you should trust this much, much more than what you're trusting from Nielsen. So buy from us. Honestly, really, I do feel it will every year somebody is going to really knock Nielsen to sort of bring more customers their way.
Farrah, one of the things that has always struck me about the problem with Nielsen over the last few years, at least, is that they've tried so hard to modernize a system that really wasn't broke. All they needed to do was adjust the way in which they counted a viewer. You know, they could have continued with the diary system. They could have just continued with the Nielsen families. They didn't have to go into digital types of measurement. All they needed to do was say, it's not just the viewers who are watching it at the original airtime. It's also the viewers who are watching it via streaming platforms, and give a total audience view via those metrics. It seems to me that this effort to modernize ignored the basic fact that there was a system. It didn't work perfectly, but it was acceptable. And everybody would have been fine with it and continued to use it and continued to be relatively happy with it if it had actually counted enough of the audience, which it stopped doing because it ignored streaming. Am I off base with that in terms of my methodology?
Well, I mean, the thing that I'm laughing about is like all they had to do was just subtly change the definition of a member of the audience. When the IAB continues to argue over what an impression is on a banner ad.
Right.
I think it's a more complicated question than you're giving it credit for, especially because everybody has a different set of incentives in defining what makes someone a viewer. And I think that has long been part of the problem. And so it's not just Nielsen's inability to figure out how to deal with streaming. It's advertisers and broadcasters both having skin in the game about whether or not they want to count streaming. Does streaming undermine the live to air or the real-time broadcast, or broadcast plus 24, broadcast plus 7? All of those things we're trying to somehow account for. First of all, time shifting. The streaming equation just gets even more complicated. How do we know somebody watched it? How do we know that they were actually in front of their whatever device when the stream happened? How are we then parsing a viewer on a mobile device versus a viewer?
That's getting right to my point, though. That's getting right to my point, though, Farrah, because the system never knew whether someone was actually watching the content. They could have been in the bathroom. They could have been getting a beer. They weren't. It never knew. But everybody accepted that.
Yes, that's true for broadcast television with TVs that had antennas on them. When you start to add digital, and I was there in 1999 trying to build advertising and brand sites and whatever for companies. The belief was, well, hey, it's all coded in binary. It's all on a computer, so therefore everything is measurable. And so that changes the incentives. When it's, hey, we push the signal out into the air, and some people pick it up, and some people are watching it, and some people are getting a beer, and some people are going to the bathroom. That we can live with this broad fiction. The signal was sent, and it was received by a television set. That's as far as we need to go in defining this universe. But once you start saying, hey, we can measure every second of the thing. I used to work on white papers for cable head ends that literally took video on demand content and counted up how many times was it watched all the way through, when was it paused, how many times was it rewound or fast forwarded. We were trying to divine from this information some kind of meaning. And that has been the thing that digital has brought us, is the belief that we can measure everything to find the hidden significance inside.
And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem. I mean, I remember talking to I've said this many times on the show. I remember talking to a Time Warner executive who said, I said, well, the best thing about television is it's not measurable. And she got really upset and said, no, we're measurable, and explained in great detail. And I said, you don't understand. As soon as you prove that you're measurable, you're going to be just as invaluable to an advertiser as any digital brand ad in a banner. I mean, it's just like banner ads always claim that we were more measurable because we were digital. But the results were that you became less valuable because it became obvious how ineffective the ad was in terms of the metrics you were applying to it. And I think that's what I'm getting to. If we believe that brand advertising works in a way that's mystical and not really all that measurable, why are we trying to measure it so intensely?
Right. And I think that this is where, Nielsen should, by dint of its, longevity and history, be in a position to make some meaningful distinctions. I mean, one of the things that, I spend a fair amount of time in my practice trying to help my clients figure out is, some things are better left looking at an analytics dashboard. Then we find out that they don't have one of those set up, or if they do, they don't have it set up for the kinds of things that are meaningful to their businesses or to their brands to measure those things. They're just measuring impressions or clicks or whatever.
Yeah.
Then there's a question of, okay, what can't I get from analytics, but I need a large enough sample set that a survey is the right response? What is something I need to go deep on and I'm comfortable having small sample sizes to explore something in detail? All of those things lead to different methods and different approaches. And I think part of what's happened is we've confused reach with impressions. They're not the same thing. An impression, though we still argue over the definition of it, is I saw it. Like it appeared in front of my eyes. It made an impression. I saw it. Whereas reach never concerned itself with an impression. It got out there to this number of households. This number of people subscribe to it, and we think it gets passed around this many times on average. That's reach. Reach is it's out there in the world. If we tested people on the content later, they might pass or they might fail, but we reached them. And these things should have different levels of value, and they should be measured differently, and they should be assigned to different goals depending on the campaign or the piece of creative or the ad spend more generally. But that's not. We're not good as an industry at having those kinds of nuanced conversations out in public. I think in conference rooms at hotels where we're arguing about what an impression is, we're pretty good at that, at least having the argument. But I think Nielsen has both survived longer than many of us, I think, myself included, thought they would, just because they've got a longer historical data set, they've got more experience doing this kind of thing. And in many respects, for large companies and large advertisers and the broadcasters who are still broadcasters, not just streamers or people with such small digital cable audiences that we're kind of inventing a system of pretending we know what their audience size is, that there are still plenty of people willing to pay the top dollar Nielsen can command for something they're really quite good at. And that is still hugely valuable to a great number of brands. Ipsos Mori in the UK is constantly reminding people that millions of people watch terrestrial television. And that those audiences, like Lester Holt, is still getting way more viewers than Trevor Noah, right? So those are not, they're not truly comparable things. And Nielsen's really good at that. They're also, frankly, even if they are kind of making up sample for tiny digital cable broadcasters, their models are pretty robust. They're based on good historical data. You can at least think it's directional. You can make some decent decisions based off of it. So I think they've gotten beaten up for things that they shouldn't be held responsible for. I think they've tried to take responsibility for things they should have just said, nope, not our circus, not our monkeys. I think that they, on the other hand, continue to provide a pretty valuable service for those that are willing to pay for it. So I don't know where that lets us out on this conversation. Go Nielsen.
No, it's really very, very concise and gives us a lot to think about. But we've got to wrap up. We've got to get down to the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with the voice you just heard, Farrah Bostic. You can find her at thedifferenceengine.co. Tell us what's going on in your world, Farrah. What would you like to promote?
Well, breaking news, I just took some Claritin, so things are going to get better in the next hour or so.
Not unless you take Flonase. Flonase is the bomb.
I've got a few interesting projects this summer, but one that actually two that I would like to talk about here. One is we are embarking on a piece of, it's a project that I'm doing with another researcher named Shelley Sather. We are doing a deep dive into these, what we're calling culture of politicos. These are 3 tribes: pollsters, political operatives, and political journalists, to understand the sort of send model of how people are comprehending, digesting, experiencing the political system. And then we're going to turn it the other direction and see what happens on the receive side. And we're going to pilot that in a little smallish township in Pennsylvania called Coatesville. So we're kicking that off next week. And then the second thing is I am collecting interviews and stories with people of color who work in advertising to find out how they crafted their careers. And we are going to put that together in a kind of song exploder style, which I mean, you will not hear my voice at all. It will be entirely the voices of people telling their stories. We've done 4 of the interviews so far. They're great. We're tentatively calling it Twice as Good. And so if there are people out there that would like to be interviewed or have recommendations, hit me up. I would love to talk to those folks.
Sounds great. Sounds awesome. Now, next up, we have Bill Hartnett. Not really sure where we can find you, Bill, so I'm just going to let you turn you loose and tell us what you'd like to promote. What would you like to talk about?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for changing my mind about adtech, and I want to thank Farrah for changing my mind about Nielsen. But, honestly, I've just been working on a lot of great shows lately, so I'm going to promote AMC. And I would say if you haven't seen The Terror yet, which is based on the Dan Simmons book of the same name about some English explorers, sort of historical fiction, stuck in the ice, looking for the Northwest Passage. It's really fantastic, a very slow burn. And also Dietland, which is coming up based on the book of the same name. And I think it's very timely as it has a lot of issues to do with it really ties into sort of the Me Too, Time's Up movement, and also a lot of stuff to do with women and body image. And I think they're both really fantastic things. And you can usually find me running in a New York Roadrunners race if you really want to find me.
I don't know if that's the best place for me to find you because I wouldn't be able to keep up with you. So there you go. Would not catch up with you. Next up, we have Jerlyn Thomas. You can find her working at Wonderman, which is wonderman.com, but you can also find her at other places. You tell us about your website. You tell us about your running and all the other cool stuff. What would you like to promote, Jerlyn?
All the places. So I'm happy that Farrah brought this up because in the past couple years, I've been trying to be more of a connector, a mentor. I am a person of color, and actually,
let's talk.
Yes, and actually the only person of color on my team, and I'm in creative. And I'm doing more events where I meet other people of color and find the talent and connecting everyone to each other. I also volunteer for STEM and script ed programs. So recently I did a talk with Microsoft and a panel with the only person of color, the only woman of color on there. And I was able to inspire young people. So I actually try to have other people in our field inspire people who are growing up, Gen Z. Gen Z, I am really fascinated by them, so I try to make sure they're still motivated and stay within STEM fields, and now they include art, so it's now STEAM. And I illustrate every day. I post it on Commute Artists on Instagram, and you can follow me and my triathlons at Jerlyn Thomas on Instagram.
Yeah, and if you have not seen Jerlyn's artwork, if you've not seen her work as a designer, she is really one of the best. So definitely check her out and keep her in mind.
Thank you, Bob.
Very big fan of yours. And last but not least, we have John Wall. You can find him at eventhero.io. That's the home of the company where he is the vice president of marketing. You can also find him at Marketing Over Coffee, which is his long-running podcast, which is continuing to get lots and lots of people listening on a weekly basis. So fantastic for you, John. Tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, well, Farrah had mentioned meaningful analytics dashboards, and so that just brought to mind my Marketing Over Coffee co-host, Christopher Penn, his company, Brain Trust Insights. They specialize in lighting up dark data, and a big part of that is getting your Google Analytics configured properly, and then they also do they have a marketing GPS predictive forecast where they take, hundreds of millions of records and grind that in, and they're able to kind of show you when in the year you should be really driving your ad budget, so that you can push the peaks and ride through the troughs. And I wanted to give them a plug. You can check them out at braintrustinsights.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, Christopher's always doing amazing stuff. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can even find out how to advertise on the program, so check it all out at thebeancast.com. And don't forget, we finally have transcription service available for the show through transcribeme.com. Go to transcribeme.com/BeanCast, and they'll give you a nice discount on your first transcription order just because you're a listener. So check it out at transcribeme.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, location data vendor LocationSmart was already under fire for selling our locations to businesses, governments, and law enforcement. But apparently, Farrah, they were so excited about demoing their service, they neglected to lock down the demo itself, resulting in a gaping backdoor that just about anyone could exploit. Apparently, The researchers who found it said that you didn't even need to be a hacker to get in here. This was so easy to exploit.
You know, I'm the same way. I just get so excited. Like, you know, I get a new Rent the Runway Unlimited shipment and I'm so excited about the clothes. I just forget to put any on. I go running right out into the street.
Now, next up, Google showcased that amazing duplex demo at I/O a couple weeks back. But when Axios questioned them more closely, John, it became quickly evident that the whole presentation was probably staged and there never was an actual appointment being made. You know, I understand doing demos and making sure everything works exactly the way you hope it's going to work. But when you're doing a tech demo in front of other tech programmers, it seems like a given that you ought to get your demo actually working, or else people are going to start asking some really tough questions and find out that you're all BS.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So, yeah, no, it's just unbelievable. And it, like we said, this goes back to training AI. But the nice touch for me was having like salon background sound, you know, behind the voice. That was like that's the deluxe package right there.
They did a good job with that fakery. Now, the U.S. Air Force decided to get in on the whole Yanni Laurel meme, but, Jerlyn, they really missed the spirit of the whole thing by using it to tweet instead about how many Taliban fighters they had just killed through an airstrike, saying that they wish they had heard Yanni or Laurel, but instead they just heard our machine guns tearing them down. This obviously was taken down really, really quick, but it just shows that, once again, real-time marketing is just a crapshoot of putting out stuff that's going to get you in trouble 90% of the time for the hope of getting that one time where you're actually doing something that's meaningful.
I always wonder who manages their feed. But by the way, Bob, did you hear Yanni or Laurel?
Oh, I definitely heard Laurel.
I heard Laurel, but my boyfriend heard Yanni, and we're like our house divided right now, so...
I'm in a house divided as well, so. Next up, Maurice Levy of Publicis tried to throw shade at WPP by saying WPP would benefit from hiring Tim Armstrong to replace Sir Martin, but that the position would not benefit Mr. Armstrong in return. But in the end, Bill, all he just did was remind us that the entire agency holding company model is failing, because he's saying that this guy from the tech industry really shouldn't take an advertising position because it's not really going to help his career out.
Well, it's funny. I don't know if it was so much a reminder of that it's failing, other than Maurice Levy was trying to show like, hey, at least we don't have a scandal over here. But honestly, the more you read about it, I mean, I think Tim would be great for that job, and I think that what replaces the whole, basically this massive piece of the advertising industry. It may be failing, but again, like so many things that we've talked about today, what replaces that?
Accenture. I think that's the point. I'm of the firm belief that yes, Tim Armstrong would be great for WPP, but that Levy's absolutely right. It's like saddling him up to a sinking ship. He'll be great for it for a time, but it's not likely that he's going to be able to right that ship in any kind of meaningful way over the long haul. Well, last but not least, that much maligned Snapchat redesign? Remember that, guys? Well, you weren't the only ones to hate it. Every designer who saw it prior to launch warned them how flawed the concept was, Jerlyn, but the company released it anyway. So there you go.
You know how difficult it is for us to tell, account sometimes like our designs are what they need to sell. It's a struggle. It's a constant struggle. No one listens to us, Bob. No
one listens to us, do they?
No.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, don't you think that was, I mean, honestly, I feel like that was driven from the top. And I think that Snapchat suffered some negative, a lot of negative publicity. A lot of stuff last year happened. And I think they felt like, right from the top, let's just completely replace the whole app and how it looks. And that will make everything better. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, that was where it was driven, is like, let's get the attention off of other stuff and get attention back on the app. And, a lot of times when you have a deadline and you go out with what you've got, not with what really is going to work.
It's also one of these things where people got so used to the design, because I actually don't use Snapchat as much because I found it pretty bizarre. Like, the user experience was not very good. And yes, I'm a millennial that doesn't use it, but people got used to how it functioned, and now you're changing the entire app. Some people don't like change.
Agreed. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online, use the hashtag #AdFail5, that's pound, AdFail, and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us soon.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
Or even hope to join us then. I've only said that 500 times and I got it wrong.
Oh my God.
It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.